Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Dr. Dennis Carroll again. We are teaming up for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. I really have been sleeping too long, and I see you have brought me nutritional value I must feed. Absolutely delicious. A tad bit messier than preferred, yet no worries. I can clean up the mess a little bit later. Without further ado, it is time for Dennis Carroll and myself to take a walk into the madness.
Stood up. I said, oh my god, it's a werewolf. And everybody in the car freaked out.
My creatures of the night, yes, once again, you are tuning in to Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. Dr. Dennis Carroll has found his way into the fox den and is setting up the fire again for us so that we can burn the timber into the early hours of the morning and read a few chapters from the Midnight Society book. Dennis, my guy, how you doing?
Oh, dark night. Perfect night for the subject we've got on hand tonight.
Sounds excellent for sure. What have you been up to in general? Staying busy, I see?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of podcasts here lately, my own podcast and other people's as well. And matter of fact, I've got one lined up with my good friend Shanty Mayfair Thursday afternoon. I'm going to be talking about the Knights Templar, the Knights of the Temple. A very fascinating subject, and some people believe that they are really the backbone, so to speak, of the Illuminati. So it should be an interesting broadcast.
Very intriguing for sure. I'm familiarized with the Knights Templar and many other things. I just tend to, as you know, try to gear my energy and intellect towards the topics that I cover here on Midnight Lycanthropy. Yet before I go to bed every night, I always put on things that I can learn about. I've heard many interesting things about the Knights Templar and all kinds of intriguing things, and I always encourage everybody, you got to learn numerous things per day. I try to just fill my brain up with all kinds of interesting stuff. Yeah, you're going to like this. I was working on some art the other day, and actually it made some werewolves or dogmen that were wearing some Knights Templar armor. Pretty cool stuff.
Well, there was supposed to be, there is a rumor, and I'm going to kind of get into some deeper research on this Knights Templar, that there was supposed to be a secret sect of them that were actually werewolves. I found that very interesting. They were also called the Hounds of God. So it's some interesting research, without a doubt. Could you actually have a sect of werewolves that were doing good and not evil? That's interesting.
That is very interesting and bizarre stuff because, like you always touch base on, usually those things tend to not go kindly on either side, meaning usually if you try to use that for good. There's actually, I'm super disappointed with it to an extent, but also the plot line is awesome. You might want to check it out. Yet the CGI is so dang bad, but the plot, the acting's pretty good. It takes place down in Mexico. It's on Max, which used to be HBO Max. It's called the Coyote. It does a really good depiction of how this guy, more or less, is a coyote man skinwalker and how he becomes it. It's super creepy, seems to be semi accurate on the depictions on how it all unfolds. Yet the CGI is so bad, man. I can't even take it serious at points in time.
Well, there are some very interesting tie-ins with that. Definitely, as a matter of fact, that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit tonight. Rougarou, which is has a lot of interesting roots in voodoo and black magic, and it's a very spiritual type of an animal, more so than I think it's very. In some ways, it's kind of similar to a Wendigo in some ways, but in other ways, it's completely different. But also, I think you have the attributes of the skinwalker as well as this. And there are a lot of people never talk about this much, but there are supposed skinwalkers who are sort of the cream of the crop. They sort of the very best skinwalkers, and they can supposedly shapeshift better and do darker magics than some other run of the mill type skinwalkers. They are sort of the elite, and they are called the Black Coyote skinwalkers. And what it is that they are sort of deeper and darker in the black magic that they use. And some of these things may also be connected with the Rougarou. Now, of course, you're familiar with the Rougarou. I'm sure you are. You know a good bit about it. And it is something that definitely haunts the swamplands of the Bayou country and in Louisiana and parts of Mississippi and areas like that. The Rougarou is thought to be a dark spiritual entity that can actually possess someone. And I find this very interesting because it kind of goes over into demonic possession in a way. And yet you still got sort of also the attributes of a skinwalker as well. The Black Coyote skinwalkers, who are supposed to be, they're very much like what we would term necromancers to a certain extent. They are the higher echelon of those that do the black magic and all that. And they are supposed to be very, very more powerful than your standard skinwalker. The regular skinwalker has it is an interesting attribute about the regular skinwalker. They tend to have a very diversified interest in things. Okay, they may just do things to haunt people. They may do things to harass people. They may do revenge on them and certain things like that to get back against them with black magic. But now the Black Coyote, I think even the other skinwalkers are scared of them because they are so much more powerful and so much more darker, like the necromancer. Now, not only do they supposedly reanimate corpses to become sort of like, you might say, a southwestern type of a zombie, per se, but this zombie doesn't go around eating people like you see in Hollywood. These are zombies that more or less like servants. They can be sent on missions to do that. And I'm going to tell you a story in a moment of something that happened during Katrina in New Orleans. But the interesting thing about the Black Coyote, being they're so much more powerful, they can maintain their shape-shifting abilities longer than the average skinwalker can. Now, the average skinwalker is supposed to be, let's just say, sort of hard at keeping their shape when they change to a certain extent. It takes a lot of power to maintain that shape, in other words. Whereas in the black coyote, they are more powerful, more darker, and they can retain that shape longer, and it is more powerful than your average skinwalker. If you can imagine that. And that's the interesting aspect of that. And they say that the Rougarou actually is a type of a black coyote skinwalker to a certain extent. And that they can change and maintain the shape. Now, there are supposed to be other ways to become a Rougarou, of course. You can violate the tenets of Lent. You can go against some of the things of the church. Or you can be just an evil person, you know. If you have very bad intentions towards other people and all that, you can also become a Rougarou. And you can become one for I think it's 100 days. And then you revert back to being a normal person again. But here's the interesting thing about the Rougarou. Very much like any kind of werewolf, they could be your next door neighbor. They could be your best friend, and you never know it until it was too late.
Wow. Straight up, very intriguing, very bizarre, yet also very creepy stuff right there, my friend. Do you feel there is a difference or a reason why a skinwalker would pick a coyote over, per se, a wolf? Why do you think that is?
Well, the coyote, of course, is known as a trickster. And it's looked upon in some ways as kind of good and bad. Most of the time, it's kind of bad in some ways. It leads you or tricks you into doing sometimes. But sometimes it can do that supposedly for your own good. But most of the time, it doesn't turn out that way. Here's the thing about the black coyote skinwalker. When they change over into the coyote, they are dark. They're black looking. That exemplifies their dark spiritual nature. And they're supposed to maintain this shape a whole lot longer, and they can also do other shapes better than skinwalkers can do. Now, most of your skinwalkers supposedly can not only change into coyotes, they can change into ravens or crows. They can change into a fox. They can even change into a wolf. They can supposedly take on different things. But now the black coyote is supposed to be more of an expert at doing this, and it's more powerful, and it does take this form than your standard skinwalker would be. Skinwalker, the standard skinwalker has to abide by certain precepts of its black, dark, magical power type. So they have to abide by certain precepts. And whereas in the black coyote, he doesn't do that because he's so much more powerful. He has a more of a lenient way about doing these things than the standard skinwalker. Now, the Rougarou, of course, if it is brought about by voodoo or certain other aspects of this, and it's not just an evil person turned bad or whatever the situation might be, they can be more powerful too. And of course, they are often talked about as looking like a big black shape, kind of thing, shaped like a wolf. It has a black texture to it. It's very dark, very much like the black coyote in that respect. And you have to wonder if maybe they're interchangeable. The same person doing the same thing because the dark attributes are showing up when they change in that respect. So it's almost like a shadow in some ways, but it can also have very much like wolf-like or coyote features to it that make it stand out. Of course, there is a story. I'll tell you right quick, and I was told this. That during Katrina, there was a team of people that had to go from house to house. Unfortunately, this is something people had to do in a hurricane, the aftermath of a hurricane. And if they found a body or something in this house, they would have to mark it with red paint. 1, 2, or 3, ever how many bodies are supposed to be in that dwelling, so that people who came in later, the health people would, collect the bodies They came upon this one house, and they couldn't find anybody except for when they got to the living room. And in the living room, shackled to this wall, was something that they said looked like a cadaver. Okay, and you could tell this was something that was, a very deteriorated person, put it that way. And that they had attributes to this thing very much like either a wolf or coyote looking kind of look about it. But it also had human characteristics like as well. But yet, while they were standing there looking at this thing, shackled, chained to the wall, it laughed at them. It actually opened its mouth and laughed at them. Which really put the fear of God in them. They took off. They left. They immediately got out of the house. They marked the house, one body in there, and that was it. They said, let whoever else is coming after us take care of this situation. I'm not going to touch that thing, whatever that thing is in there. But that was probably the remnant of sort of a zombie-like thing that was left over from some type of voodoo ritual. But it sounded kind of like to me that it might have been something that a definite skinwalker would have done or left behind. Those were very, very strange days in New Orleans and Louisiana, definitely. And it seems like that whenever there's a hurricane or a storm of some sort, something like that, it seems to stir up supernatural stuff even more. So you have a tendency to run into these things on a larger scale sometimes. There were a lot of reports that came out of Hurricane Katrina, not only about reptilians being seen actually wearing uniforms and stuff like that, but other things as well connected with voodoo and some other things like that. But that's one of the most interesting that I heard. What was really left behind in that house, and why was it left that way?
Dang. Sounds like something from a supernatural episode. So creepy right there. Absolutely great stuff. That reminds me of a case I've covered before on my thread. I don't know the exact location off the top of my head. Yeah, it involved a child and his mother. I believe either his father or his mother's boyfriend. Long story short, is they went to an old house to meet up with somebody. And when they went inside, there was this strange guy that looked to be really hairy, and he was sitting in his underwear, and his face seemed to be like going in and out of socket, more or less, like it was just starting to transform, and he was rubbing some strange ointment over himself. Creepy and bizarre.
That is strange. Well, there have been also other reports, when I mentioned this, people actually hearing these things on the roof of the house. And they would go outside with flashlights, and they would actually see these skinwalkers or whatever, rougarous, on top of the house, actually. That's sort of typical skinwalker stuff there, in a way. But having it being rougarous is very interesting in that respect. We've got to remember these things are definitely all tied in very, very dark and evil magic. The power is very demonic, I want to say, whatever name you want to put on it. It's just a very, very dark and very powerful magic. And it can take many different forms and can attack in many different ways. It can attack spiritually, it can attack physically, it can attack mentally. It can harass you, it can haunt you, it can follow you home. There have been many, many reports of people actually seeing these rougarous or even dogmen or whatever. These things will haunt them later on. They would maybe see them in the yard later, or they'll see them around their house. I've even actually had reports of these things being seen inside of people's houses. It's almost as if once you see these things, you have, whether you know it or not, invited them into your life. You've given them some kind of power, like that they can sort of invite themselves into your existence. That's not good, usually.
No, that is not good at all. Also, now that you're talking about the Louisiana area, there's a gentleman I'm trying to get to stop by and talk about his encounter with what he believed was a female werewolf. I don't know if you've heard it before, but he worked at, I think it was a clothing store or an accessory store that had clothing. A woman came in, seemed alluding, yet it was back in, I believe he said, the early 80s. So it's not really very hard to get a grasp on. Things were a little bit more old school back then. People didn't have cell phones. He asked her if she wanted to hang out. She said, her parents don't like her having boys over. He could meet her at some park at a certain time. He ends up driving for, I think he said, like 35 minutes. He goes to meet her, yet she is not there. Some guy playing basketball asks him if he wants to play. He says he's just waiting. Eventually, she doesn't show up, so he starts playing basketball with this guy and some other guys that show up. As they finish up, they're getting ready to head back towards his car and also a store to grab some beer. Well, he is a little bit ahead of one of the guys in the back, hears this guy scream. They all turn around and see this enormous dog woman that had female features on her body, etc. And then they ended up firing at her and she ran away. Super creepy encounter as well.
That's right. Let me tell you a quick story that a guy told me that he was a truck driver, and but before he became a truck driver, he worked at a gas station, and this was down in Louisiana. I don't know exactly where. It might have been around Shreveport, I think. And he said that he was working, and he worked the night shift at this gas station. And as a matter of fact, that's why it didn't pay enough, so eventually he became a truck driver on top of that. But this is before he became a truck driver. But one night he was working, and he was always very leery, especially at night. Of course, anybody would be dealing with the public in a place like a gas station or something like that. Definitely about a robbery or whatever the situation. You're definitely on guard all the time, something like that. And said that this guy came in the store and said there was a woman with him. And he said this guy came in the store and said he was like a bodybuilder. Looked like a bodybuilder. And he told what he looked like. He had red hair. And he said he was very hairy. Kind of had hair all, very, I'm not going to say he had long hair, but he was just, kind of a hairy guy, had a beard. And but he had red hair, and he had piercing blue eyes. And this guy said these eyes that just like look through you. And so this is the first thing he noticed. Then this guy walked around the store with this woman, and they were talking and all that. The guy kept looking at the the guy who worked at the gas station. They kept how you keep checking somebody out. He kept looking at him, and the guy with the blue eyes was looking back at him every now and then. He would look over at him, and he said that it was very intent, a very strong intentional look. Like what are you looking at, kind of thing. And that he kept watching this guy because there was something wrong with this guy. Said there was something that wasn't right about him. And he said he had a very animalistic like quality about him. And he said he had all this hair on him, and he had these piercing eyes. He said, honest to God, this is what he saw now. I said, if I were going to pick anybody out to be a Rougarou or a werewolf, this guy would be it. And so the guy finally, I think the lady that was with the guy come up and bought something. They walked out of the store. Well, the guy was very intentional. Watch it. I got to, check this guy out. I got to see what kind of vehicle he gets in case he comes back or whatever. But he was thinking about more or less safety purposes. So he goes and he looks and he watches this guy, and the man, and he said that he sees the woman in the car, and it's like a truck or something like a Toyota 4Runner or something like that. He sees her get in, but he doesn't see him. He keeps watching and said, well, where did that guy go? Did he go to the restroom or something, but he didn't ask for a key. You had to ask the old, gas station restrooms, you had to ask for a key. And he didn't ask for a key. and he saw him walk over towards the dumpsters that were the side of the building. He said the guy turned around and looked back at him and said, honest to God, it was a werewolf. He said he said this guy was at least 8 foot tall. He said he was a werewolf. He had the ears sticking up. He said it was an honest to God werewolf. And the guy kind of, this is the weird part. The guy he noticed me looking at him. And he started walking back towards the car, to get in the car. And of course, it was a little bit darker on that side. So he kind of walked in the shadow. He said when he did, he looked up at me, just looked at me, and kind of smiled at me. And he got in the car and they drove off. And he said that man was a werewolf. There's no doubt about it in my mind. That's what he was, a rougarou or werewolf, something like that. And he said, here's what really bothers me and keeps me awake at night. How many more like that are out there walking around among us?
Wow. That's what I'm saying right there. The terminology I like to use, because it is also the name of my other podcast, Camp Nightmare Fuel. That is some straight up nightmare fuel right there. Just both of those situations, the one I spoke to you about and the one that you just mentioned right there. Wow. Very intriguing and interesting stuff. And I do know that Louisiana and New Orleans has a very deep rooted history that involves voodoo and such, like you said, for sure. Straight up bizarre stuff.
Absolutely. And I've talked to a lot of people. I've had some friends who live in Louisiana, some people who have actually lived on the bayous and all that down in there. And they have told me one thing: if you come to Louisiana, you have to go out on the bayous or around any of the swampland or any of the rural areas. He said it's a good idea, to say your prayers and keep some kind of silver on you of some sort. Like maybe a blessed silver medallion or something like that. Because these things are supposed to be very, very evil and very active in these areas. And the people that live in the rural areas, especially in the Bayou country and all that, they know very well what these things are, how to deal with them, and how to try to keep themselves safe. But even they fall victim sometimes. Rougarous, werewolves, all these other type of things, the skinwalkers that may be there. These things are always looking for an opportunity of some sort to not only enter in your life, to haunt your life, to wreak havoc in your life in many ways. So it's always best to be sort of prayed up and prepared when you go into these areas, especially carry some type of silver with you, whether it be a silver dagger or a silver tip cane or a silver medallion, whatever it might be. This is the one surefire way to ward these things off, supposedly.
Again, very interesting and very intriguing and bizarre stuff. Throughout your adventures, why do you think it is silver, per se, always has something involved? Why is it that, say, brass or steel or gold or diamond, why is it none of those seemingly are always mentioned? Why is it just silver?
Well, I think silver, and I've been asked that question before. Silver is one of the few rare metals that doesn't need a lot of refining when it comes out of the ground. Even gold needs to be refined to a certain extent. The silver comes out more pure out of the ground than gold does, supposedly. So it doesn't need to be refined. But here's the number one thing, and I've always showed this no matter what, and I carry a silver bullet with me. I have silver with me at all times. It's not just the silver, it's not just the metal. The main thing that makes these the most powerful thing is the fact that it is blessed. That gives it a more spiritual power to it than its composition or whatever its makeup may be. So if you've got brass, if you've got iron is another thing that is very big against evil. Iron, any type of thing like that. But the main thing, the main catalyst gives us its most power is that it has to be blessed. That's what fuels it against darkness.
Makes sense. Again, very interesting stuff. And that makes me think of when I was younger, rest in peace, mom. But she would always play these dungeon type games where you had to have special, per se, weapons to deal with skeletons or all kinds of other things. And yeah, they always make mention of ironclad swords, etc. Very cool stuff.
Oh, yeah. Any kind of, I used to have a poem of that somewhere. I'll have to send it to you sometime. But it's iron against evil, salt against the shadows, the different types of things that are supposed to be very effective against this evil that is in the world today, supposedly. But the number one thing, like I say, well, when I was in law enforcement, I even had my gun and my bullets blessed with holy water. Just because it sort of adds that extra something to it, definitely, that you really need. You may, hopefully you never need it, but it's a good thing to have if you do.
Yes, it is very good to make sure you have the proper tools for the trade you are trying to attend to. Always makes me fall back to that supernatural episode where, well, obviously it's fictional, the TV show, yet they actually do make some pretty cool references that seem to be spot on with stuff. Either way, though, Sam and Dean are the professional cryptid or monster hunters, right? But then you got those two guys that run the website that come in with all the supposed gear to pick up the paranormal, etc. But then Sam and Dean are like, what are you guys doing? And it always makes me think of that when you bring that topic up.
As a monster hunter, the very first question I always ask is, what is it going to take to kill this monster? You run into it. That's the number one thing you need to know. What's going to put it down and do it effectively? Because you may have to go that route. You don't want to, you know. And like I said, I'm a little bit different than some monster hunters. I would like to capture it on camera, but you never know what the situation may bring, and you need to be ready for whatever transpires, especially when it comes to monster hunting. Of course, the number one rule of monster hunting is that you do not become the monster that you are hunting.
Again, very great stuff. Totally creepy, but absolutely excellent. What do you think about this? The whole fear aspect, meaning obviously people deal with different aspects of fear, but I feel like when you go through trials and tribulations in life, sometimes it brings you to places that, well, you can't really fear much more after that. So when someone sees a paranormal entity per se and they immediately become afraid, then it gives fuel to that being. But what if somebody doesn't fear that entity? What's it going to do next? Meaning, if it's trying to scare you and you're not afraid of it whatsoever and you're pretty much standing your ground, right? And hey, I'm not afraid of you. What's the response going to be?
Everybody knows fear to a certain degree. You're going to always run into a fearful situation, but how you react to it, that's what counts. And I tell people a lot of time, you've got to control and direct your fear in the ways you want it to go, that it needs to go to serve your life or whatever it is you're trying to do. But you got to remember one thing: the greatest fear of all, fear of the unknown. Once you study something, become familiar with it, then it becomes less unknown, and that gives you more of a handle on your fear with it. So once it becomes more known to you, you lose a lot of your fear of it. And I found this to be very true. That's why I tell people, especially if you're monster hunting and stuff like that, you've got to really know what you're going after, how to deal with it. What's your plan? What's your contingency plan? If you do find it, you gotta have all the bases covered. If you're gonna play the game, if you're gonna be on top of your game, you better be on top of your game, because when it comes to monsters, if you're not, you can be put down very quickly, very badly.
That would make some very logical sense for sure. Yet also, again, very creepy stuff. What have you got lined up for future endeavors coming up your way, Mr. Carroll, as we do start to round home base here?
Well, right now I'm working on finishing my book, which is called Paracryptidology, to hunt monsters and things of nightmare. I'm going after some of the most unusual cryptids that are out there. Those are the ones not your standard Bigfoot and Dogman and Werewolves. I'm going after some of the very interesting stuff that's out there that nobody knows that much about, like the Stringoi or the Striga, or whatever may be out there, whatever is different, whatever is unusual. And here's another aspect of monster hunting that we must always remember. You need to be boned up on your folklore. You need to know your folklore inside out, because there is a lot of valuable information in that folklore. Don't discredit it. It is very, very important, because this folklore is mostly the record of people who have encountered or dealt with these things, survived to tell you about it.
Wow. Again, excellent stuff. It is very true, though, as you just stated. You can't be ill prepared to be dealing with something, because that is how so many people end up vanishing or, well, having run ins with things that they really shouldn't have a run in with. Have you personally ever had a chance to work on any Rougarou cases yourself?
I have had a couple of Rougarou cases, matter of fact, one that was in the swamp of Georgia that I worked years ago. They have cropped up in this area, definitely. Although we're not in the Bayou country where I'm at, South Carolina, but we do have some swamps, so definitely. And I think these things are not tied to one certain locale. I believe they're tied to a certain land feature, and that includes the swamps. Here's the interesting thing about the swamp. There's a lot of voodoo done in them, a lot of magic going on in the swamp. I think this would be the perfect place for this kind of darkness to grow and to be found, definitely, without a doubt. That's where you're going to find certain areas in this world, how they dark stained within. Certain areas that are haunted by these things. That's where you go look. You don't go look for where it's not at. Always look for where it's at. That's where you'll find what you're looking for most of the time. And it makes common sense when you think about it, especially when it comes to monster hunting. I'm kind of like that other guy once said, somebody once said, oh, there's no such thing as monsters. My reply is always, well, who told you that? No,
That's
either
absolutely
I.
awesome.
I do.
Great stuff right there for sure. It does really make you wonder where all these tales and these legends all come from. I mean, did everybody in the world wake up one day and decide that they were going to just come up with a non-existing creature that, well, even though they couldn't talk to other people across the world, it still mimicked what others were seeing? It's all so mind-boggling for sure. And the Rougarou is obviously one of the bigger hitters in the game. And then, you got the Beast of Bray Road, the Michigan Dogman. Yeah, it's all seemingly tied in a lot more closely than we actually seem to have our hands on.
It's connected. It definitely all is connected in some strange way. It definitely is. And the interesting thing about monster hunting and all this kind of stuff is that no matter where you go, no matter what you move, you will run into the regions. There's different regions that have their different monsters. Everywhere you go, everybody's got their own version of these things. That's a fascinating aspect of it as well. That's why, I tell people the number one thing you need to do to prepare yourself to monster hunt is research, research, research. I can't stress that enough. You've got to do constant research and stay on top of your game. Absolutely. And another thing you got to remember when it comes to this kind of thing is that uh, your personal experiences will teach you the best thing. My favorite quote of all time was made by Herbert Spencer, who said that everything, every myth and legend known to mankind is not without its authentic foundation.
Again, straight up creepy, but excellent stuff right there for sure. There's just so much amazing lore information out there now. Before I've been going to bed recently, I've been watching a ton of The Proof is Out There on History Channel. Big fan of that. And also, I've been watching a ton of the old school Monster Quests just because, even though I've seen them all numerous times, I still just put it up before I go to bed sometimes to listen to it. Always intrigues me. And also, there has been a couple of times I missed things that I didn't really pick up on the first time I ended up watching the episodes too. So it's always fun.
Absolutely. You just have to apply yourself. That's the main thing, especially when it comes to research and all that. And here's the thing about that. For many, many years back in my younger days, I had to haunt libraries and actually had to dig for this information. Now it's not that way. Now you have the libraries of the world at your fingertips, called the internet, and it's a fantastic tool of research that is always available to us. And I'm really glad that we have it because it makes a complete game changer.
Doesn't it, my friend? Because like you said, you used to have to go to the library and then take out all the books in one sitting and basically seemingly be somebody out of like the Goonies, right? With a whole backpack full of books trying to figure out a subject. But now, yeah, you got the internet and everything. But I always do encourage everybody, make sure you look at the proper sources and also that you look at multiple sources, meaning it really doesn't just have to be from one source. You should always see if other quality sources are going to supply the same great information. That's what I do, meaning I like National Geographic, but if I see it on there, and then also on Discovery Channel, and then the BBC, and then PBS, and then Wall Street Journal, etc. Okay, well, it's got some merit. But if you just see it, per se on Discovery Channel, and no one else has touched base on it, I don't know. It's something that needs to be looked at further for sure in my eyes. Yet, I know you're a busy man, Dr. Carroll. Is there anything else you would like to touch base on tonight, my friend, before we let you get back to things you need to attend to?
I would just like to say about the rougarou, it's definitely a spiritual type associated animal. If it's somebody that is kind of a bad guy that sort of leans towards being kind of evil, you might want to keep them, close eye on them, just in case. You might end up like the guy at the gas station. You might meet a werewolf in the flesh. It hasn't quite turned all the way yet. I have had a lot of people tell me that they have actually encountered werewolves like that. They have also encountered vampires along the same lines as well that have come into their shops, and they know without a doubt, they just couldn't put their finger on it, but they knew without a doubt that what they were dealing with was a supernatural person or a supernaturally inclined person. So always be aware of your surroundings. Keep your head on a swivel. Keep an eye on your six. Know where you're at. Be very careful. Don't live in fear. Don't let fear rule you. You need to control your fear. You need to put fear where it needs to be. Make it productive for you. So don't live in fear. Don't let fear overrule you. But always be aware of your surroundings. And it's like we were taught in law enforcement, observe everything.
Again, absolutely legendary stuff. Wouldn't expect anything else from you, my friend. Yet to the audience, we do need to allow Dr. Carroll to attend to many other things. He needs to indulge his time. Yet no worries, he is a bi-weekly host. You can always check out our previous episodes or be on the watch for our newest episodes. Also, in the description of the video, you can find the links to his page. Make sure you head on over there and check out what he is churning out. This, for the moment, though, will be the conclusion of the meeting for the Midnight Society. It is the early hours of the morning, and well, there are things that need to be attended to. Thanks for hanging out tonight, man.
Yeah, my friend.
Ooh, my creatures of the night, I do adore every single one of you. And thank you for popping in tonight to hang out with us. Please like, comment, subscribe, feed, share it all to the algorithm. And I will see you very soon.